Before we dive into this story that's sure to move you, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It might seem like a small thing, but that simple action makes a huge difference. It's what keeps this channel going and gives me the strength to keep bringing these stories to you. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next is powerful. The hallway lights buzzed above as Nora tiptoed barefoot through the school corridor, holding a paper crane in her hand. She stopped in front of locker 137 and gently tucked it through the vent, her fingers trembling. A girl down the hall laughed. "There she is, Miss Butterfly Effect," she mocked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Two boys joined in. "What did you change today, Nora? The weather in Tokyo?" Nora didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "One act, one ripple." She turned and walked outside into the gray morning light, the cold biting at her exposed ankles. She'd left her coat on the bench again, because she believed that if she didn't, someone else wouldn't find it. From the classroom window, a teacher watched her with quiet concern, jotting something into his planner. And at locker 137, a boy named Micah opened it and froze at the folded crane inside. It was the exact shape his sister used to fold before she died. Later that afternoon, Nora sat alone beneath the old oak tree behind the gym, her long floral skirt spread over the damp grass. She plucked petals from a wild daisy, not in a game of love, but in calculation. Always 5, never 6. A gust of wind carried a piece of paper past her feet. She caught it gently, read it once, and tucked it into her notebook. Micah approached slowly, the paper crane still in his hand. His eyes were red, voice low. "How did you know?" "I didn't," she said softly, not meeting his gaze. "But the butterfly flaps anyway." He sat beside her. "They say you're insane." "I know," she smiled, "but I'd rather be insane and useful than blind and safe." She looked up at the sky, the clouds swirling like smoke trails. "Everything matters, Micah, even this conversation." He stared at her, uncertain whether to mock or believe. But when he stood to leave, he whispered, "Thanks for today." And though he didn't know it yet, that moment would save his life. The next morning, Nora woke up before the sun. She brushed her curls into place, tied a ribbon at her neck, and packed 3 items into her bag: a broken watch, a red marble, and a yellow pencil. Her room was covered in patterns, strings of notes pinned to the ceiling, arrows connecting moments, names, dates, and tiny sketches of butterflies. Downstairs, her foster mother grunted, barely looking up from her phone. "Don't forget to take your meds." "I stopped taking them," Nora replied gently, adjusting her bag strap. The woman slammed her coffee mug down. "Then don't come crying when they lock you up again." Nora paused at the door, eyes soft. They don't lock people up for being early, just for being right too soon. She stepped outside into the cold morning, walking 5 blocks to the corner where a boy always fell off his skateboard. Except today, she placed a folded napkin over the crack in the sidewalk. At 8:04 a.m., the boy glided over it without falling, never even noticing. But 20 minutes later, he'd save a child from drowning, because he wasn't in the hospital. By third period, the rumors had spread again. She plants objects in people's lockers. She thinks she can stop death. She talks to trees. Nora sat at the back of the chemistry lab, silently mixing 2 clear liquids until they turned violet. The teacher, Mr. Halverson, narrowed his eyes. "That was not the assigned experiment." Nora looked up calmly. "No, but it neutralizes smoke in case of a fire." The class laughed. "You expecting one?" someone called. She didn't answer, just leaned back in her chair and looked toward the faulty ceiling fan. Exactly 4 minutes later, a spark snapped from the fan's exposed wire. Smoke curled, the alarm blared, and students screamed. But the beaker Nora had prepared hissed as it hit the air, vaporizing the smoke instantly. Everyone froze. She stood slowly, eyes forward. If the butterfly had waited 20 seconds longer, none of us would be breathing. Outside the classroom, Kayo, a substitute teacher that day, watched her walk out through the smoke like a myth no one believed in. Yet. The principal's office smelled like old paper and cheap air freshener. Nora sat across from Dr. Ellery, who tapped her pen like a metronome. "You staged that, didn't you?" the woman said coldly. "This isn't the first time you've caused disturbances." Nora didn't flinch. "I didn't start the fire. I anticipated it." Ellery leaned forward. "You need help, Nora. Real help. Not metaphors, not butterflies." Nora met her eyes. "And you need to stop calling foresight a disorder." Through the glass window, students gathered outside, whispering, staring. The fire department had confirmed there was indeed faulty wiring, but still, the timing, the solution, it was all too clean. "I'll be watching you," the principal said through gritted teeth. Nora rose, calm as still water. "That's all I ever needed. Someone watching." And as she walked past the glass, Micah raised a finger in subtle salute. That night, Nora walked the quiet streets near the edge of town. The wind tangled her curls, but she didn't pull her cardigan tighter. She approached a payphone that hadn't worked in years and placed a single blue marble inside the coin slot. Then she whispered, "Tomorrow, 3:12 p.m. Say yes." Unseen behind a trash bin, a woman in her 20s watched her carefully, her eyes wide with disbelief. That woman would return the next day, and when the phone rang unexpectedly, she'd answer it and land her first job in months. But tonight, Nora simply smiled and walked away. She passed a mural covered in butterflies, dozens of painted wings frozen mid-flap. She touched one lightly. "You're early," she murmured. "That means something's changed." A street lamp flickered above her head. The pattern was shifting, and Nora, more than anyone, knew. When one pattern shifts, everything else follows. The next morning, Kaio sat in the teacher's lounge, scrolling through old school records on his cracked laptop. He found Nora's name buried beneath reports. Emotionally unstable, delusional, excessively observant. But something didn't fit. Her delusions always matched real outcomes. He remembered the crane, the smoke, the boy, and the sidewalk. He closed the laptop and stared out the window, watching her below. Sitting on the bench near the gate, staring at a cracked tile in the pavement. She didn't move for minutes, just stared, breathing slowly. Then, suddenly, she stood and walked toward a parked food truck. Seconds later, a man stepped on the tile and slipped hard, but landed harmlessly. Kaio rushed down and caught up to her. "How do you do that?" he asked, breathless. Nora turned to him calmly. "Everything leaves a fingerprint. The trick is knowing where the first touch was." Kaio followed her to the bus stop. She sat at the edge of the bench, hands folded, skirt fluttering in the breeze. "You studied chaos theory?" he asked, sitting beside her. She shook her head. "Chaos isn't the enemy. Ignorance is. People don't see what they aren't trained to feel." He studied her, her steady breath, the way her eyes flicked to tiny movements. "What are you looking for right now? A bird that shouldn't be here yet. A shoe untied. A driver running late," she replied without blinking. A white bird flew overhead seconds before a child tripped. Nora stood quickly and helped him up before he even cried. Kaio stood frozen. "Do you control this?" She smiled faintly. "No. I just pay attention to what most people call nothing." And somewhere deep inside him, something began to shift. The next day, Nora entered the school library just before the lunch bell. She didn't speak. She moved directly to the emergency exit and placed a folded piece of paper under the metal doorframe. Then she sat at the far end of the reading tables and waited. At exactly 12:16, a fight broke out in the cafeteria. 2 boys, 1 tray, 1 shove too many. As the students ran, chaos spilling into the hallway, one girl twisted her ankle and was nearly crushed in the stampede. But the librarian opened the emergency exit just in time, guided by the paper that read, "Open this at 12:17 or she breaks her spine." The girl escaped with a sprained ankle. The librarian turned pale and looked toward the far table. Nora was gone. Only a single yellow rose remained. Kaio arrived seconds later, scanning the crowd, heart pounding. He already knew. She was here, wasn't she? That night, Kaio sat in his apartment surrounded by printouts, sticky notes, and strings connecting names, dates, and headlines. The pattern was clear. Every time Nora appeared, something was prevented. He stared at a newspaper clipping from last year. A fire, a car crash, a school lockdown. She'd been at each site. She's not crazy, he whispered. She's running simulations. In real life. He grabbed his keys and notebook and drove through the foggy streets until he reached the small corner cafe near the hill. There she sat, legs crossed, sipping tea like she'd been waiting for him. "Did I miss something today?" he asked. Nora looked up and smiled. "No, you arrived exactly when you were supposed to." He sat down across from her. "You're trying to change the whole system, aren't you?" She stirred her tea once. "No, just enough of it, so it doesn't collapse on itself." The next morning, Nora walked into the classroom 5 minutes late. Her hair was still damp from the rain, her skirt clung to her legs. She placed a crumpled post-it on Micah's desk before taking her seat. He looked at it, confused. It read, "Don't talk back today. He's on edge." Seconds later, the teacher stormed in, visibly tense, slamming papers on the desk. Micah, usually sarcastic, clenched his jaw and stayed silent. 2 rows behind, Nora exhaled. She'd just altered a chain reaction that would have led to a suspension and a fight that would have sent someone to the hospital. But no one saw it. No one clapped. At lunch, Micah found her near the vending machines. "How did you know?" "I don't always know," she replied, "but I feel the weight of things before they fall." Then she handed him a coin. "For tomorrow, use it when your hand shakes." By Friday, even the students who once mocked her began to whisper differently. "She's weird, but like magic weird. I heard she stopped a whole cafeteria fire with a napkin and vinegar." Nora walked through the halls with the same quiet focus. But something had shifted. Respect, fear, maybe wonder. That afternoon, a new student arrived. Thin, pale, visibly anxious. Nora's eyes flicked toward him, studying his gait, his silence, the tremble in his fingers. At the library, she left a folded paper on his chair. He opened it when she was already gone. It read, "You're not invisible. Sit by the window. Say yes when she asks." He did, and when a kind girl offered him a seat in her study group, he said yes. 3 years later, she'd become his wife. But for now, he just smiled and wondered how she knew. On Monday, Nora arrived at school with a red ribbon tied tightly around her wrist. She walked straight to the courtyard, stopping beside a maintenance hatch most students didn't even notice. She placed a folded towel beneath it and walked away. At exactly 1:14 p.m., a group of kids chasing a soccer ball crashed into the hatch. The metal lid buckled, but didn't slice open the knee of the boy who landed on it. The towel absorbed the edge. No one knew who had placed it. Kaio watched it all unfold from the 3rd floor. His jaw clenched. She wasn't guessing. She was calculating. He found her later under the oak tree sketching spirals in a journal. "You planned that," he said. She looked up with tired eyes. "I didn't plan the accident. I planned the forgiveness." That evening, Kaio followed her as far as he dared, through the subway station, across 2 neighborhoods, to the edge of an abandoned community center. She lit a candle inside the dusty hall and placed it next to an old photo of her mother. "She used to tell me that one kind act could echo across the world," Nora whispered, though no one was there. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, addressed to herself. It read, "Do not open until after the last butterfly lands." She slid it into a crack in the wall. Outside, Kaio waited, his breath visible in the cold. When she stepped back into the light, he asked gently, "Are you trying to save us all?" She smiled sadly. "No, I'm just trying to shift the wind." And the moment she said it, a line of butterflies passed between them. Midwinter, impossible, like fate was listening. Tuesday morning, the entire school buzzed with rumors. Someone had anonymously submitted a list of safety failures. Broken alarms, cracked tiles, unstable lights, all perfectly timed and documented. Dr. Ellery, red-faced and furious, stormed into the main office, demanding to know who dared challenge the system. Meanwhile, Nora sat quietly in the art room, painting a scene no one recognized. A street corner, a puddle, a missing dog, a fire truck. Kaio walked in slowly, watching her work. "You submitted that report, didn't you?" She kept painting. "It wasn't a report, it was a ripple. Why not take credit?" She dipped her brush into orange. "Because when people think you want power, they stop listening." He stepped closer. "You're not crazy." She finally met his eyes. "That's what they said about the woman who warned of the flood, before the first cloud ever formed." That night, Nora sat alone in her dim bedroom, illuminated by the soft glow of string lights and scattered candlelight. She pinned a new note to the ceiling. March 19th, the choice. Below it, she drew a tree with two trunks growing in opposite directions. A knock came at her window. It was Kaio, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice trembled. "I couldn't sleep. You've been changing everything, Nora. But you haven't let anyone change you." She looked away. "Because I'm afraid if someone does, I'll lose the thread." He stepped inside carefully, placed the cocoa on her desk, and said, "Maybe the thread was meant to be shared." She closed her eyes. "If I let myself fall, who catches the others?" Kaio sat beside her. "Maybe we catch each other." And in that moment, the air around them felt still, like even the universe was listening. The following morning, the sky was unusually clear. Too clear. Nora stood on the roof of the school, staring at the sun with narrowed eyes. She held a folded paper in one hand and a single green marble in the other. Behind her, Kaio appeared out of breath. "You're not thinking of jumping timelines again, are you?" She smiled. "No, just observing an anomaly." She handed him the marble. "Hold this until sunset. Don't lose it." He didn't ask why. He trusted her now, blindly, fully. Below them, the students gathered for an assembly, unaware that a faulty speaker was minutes from collapsing on the crowd. Nora turned and descended the stairs, entering the auditorium just in time to pull a small string hidden behind the curtain. The speaker shifted, but didn't fall. "Not yet." She whispered, "That bought us 6 more hours." By afternoon, a new face entered the school. A city inspector, young and ambitious, clipboard in hand. He was there for a random audit, but nothing was random in Nora's world. She had left a note in his inbox 3 days ago. "Check the north bracket. Wear the blue tie." He wore it. He checked it. And when he discovered the instability, the auditorium was evacuated before sunset. As the crowd filed out, the speaker finally dropped, shattering on the floor with a thunderous crash. Screams echoed through the hallway, but no one was hurt. Kaio, still holding the green marble, stood stunned. She knew the minute, the second. Dr. Ellery approached Nora in a panic. "How long have you known about this?" She looked at her wristwatch. "Since the butterfly circled the west window last Thursday." Ellery stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Who are you?" And for once, Nora didn't answer. She just walked into the sunset, alive with purpose. That evening, Nora sat alone in the garden behind the community center, surrounded by candles arranged in a spiral. She pressed her palm to the soil and whispered, "One more step, just one more." Her journal lay open beside her, filled with arrows, names, and a final phrase circled 3 times. "If it rains at 6:04, she lives." Kaio arrived quietly, holding an umbrella even though the sky was clear. "Who's she?" he asked. Nora looked up, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "A girl across town. She's about to run away. And the rain stops her?" "No," Nora said softly. "The sound of it hitting her window makes her stay 5 seconds longer." He looked at the cloudless sky. "But it's not going to rain." Nora stared at him. "It has to." And then, as if the universe obeyed, a single drop landed on her hand. The rain came slowly, then all at once, soft and steady, like it had waited for her permission. Across the city, in a small apartment lit only by a flickering TV, a girl named Marla stood at the door with a suitcase in her hand. She froze as the rain tapped gently on her window pane, the rhythm interrupting her panic. She turned toward the sound, eyes filling with tears. Something about it, the softness, the timing, felt like a sign. Marla dropped the suitcase. At that exact moment, her mother opened the bedroom door, trembling. "Please don't leave." They collapsed into each other's arms. Back in the garden, Nora exhaled deeply, her palms still pressed into the earth, soaked now with water and relief. Kaio knelt beside her. "How did you know it would rain?" She looked up, smiling faintly. "I didn't." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded note, and placed it in his hand. It read, "When you doubt me, wait for the rain." The next day, Nora didn't come to school. Her seat remained empty, her presence like a breath held too long. Students whispered, teachers asked questions, but no one had answers. Kaio checked everywhere, the garden, the roof, the train station. Nothing, until he returned to the art room and found her notebook left open on the table. Each page was filled with patterns, arrows, faces, weather reports, seemingly disconnected events. But one sentence appeared again and again between the margins. The ripple must leave the pond. In the back pocket of the notebook, he found a bus ticket to another city, dated 3 hours from now. Kaio ran, through traffic, across wet pavement, past blinking lights, toward the station where she might be waiting or already gone. And as he reached the platform, he saw her, just as the doors were about to close. He lunged into the train, breathless, eyes locking with hers as she stood near the window. She didn't flinch. It was like she had known he would come. Kaio grabbed the rail and exhaled hard. "Are you really leaving?" "I have to," Nora said gently. "This town, it's stabilized. The chain has been redirected." "You talk like you're a force of nature," he said, laughing through his exhaustion. She looked at him. "No. I'm just a girl who noticed what others didn't, and sometimes noticing is enough to save the world." Kaio reached into his pocket and pulled out the green marble she had given him days ago. "I kept it," he said, "even when I didn't know why." She smiled. "You still don't." He hesitated, voice softer now. "What if this time I notice you?" The train jolted. She looked out the window. Then everything might change again. The train hummed beneath their feet, city lights blurring through the glass as Nora and Kaio stood in silence. He watched her fingers trace invisible shapes on the window, soft spirals, always turning inward. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Somewhere the wind is still misaligned," she said, eyes distant. "A child is about to choose silence instead of music. A bus will break down 5 seconds too late." He shook his head, overwhelmed. "How do you live like this? Always watching, always correcting?" She turned to him, her voice barely audible. "Because I know how it feels when no one notices. When one breath out of place collapses a life." Kaio stepped closer. "You've saved people who'll never know your name." "That's the point," she said. "The butterfly never meets the storm it creates." Then she looked up, her expression shifting. "You're going to ask me something important. Don't do it here." He stared at her, stunned. The train doors opened. She stepped out. The station was quiet, deserted. Nora stood under a flickering overhead light, her hair wild in the wind. Kaio followed, stepping into the cold night beside her. She turned slowly. "This is the moment. Your voice decides the next timeline." He hesitated. Then, "Stay. We can do this together." She smiled, but there was pain in it. "If I stay, you stop moving. You stop seeing patterns. You'll become like them. You think loving you would make me blind?" "No," she said, "but it would make me still. And still things sink." He reached out, touching her cheek. "So that's it? You just disappear into the wind like you were never real?" She leaned into his hand, eyes shining. "I was never meant to be remembered, only to be felt." And with that, she stepped back and was swallowed by the crowd. Weeks passed. Nora never returned to the school, the town, or the garden behind the community center, but she was everywhere, in small ways. The librarian began placing folded notes in returned books. "You matter more than you think." Micah started wearing a red ribbon around his wrist. The girl who once mocked Nora now ran a kindness board in the cafeteria, posting one anonymous good deed a day. And Kaio? He began mapping behavior patterns in students, starting a club for quiet thinkers, the ones who never raised their hands. Late one evening, he found himself walking by the mural near the bridge. the one with the painted butterflies. Someone had added a new one, smaller than the rest, blue, wings half open, beneath it, written in chalk. The ripple became the tide. Kaio smiled, his heart aching, not from loss, but from knowing he had truly seen her. Months later, Kaio gave a lecture at a university titled Chaos, Kindness, and the Butterfly Effect. He spoke not as a scientist, but as a witness. They called her crazy, he said, voice echoing through the packed auditorium, because she believed the smallest choices mattered. A photograph of Nora's mural appeared on the screen behind him. She didn't move mountains, she moved pebbles, and somehow those pebbles shifted everything. A student raised her hand. Do you know where she is now? Kaio paused, then smiled. No, but I know where she's been. He reached into his pocket and held up a single green marble. And I know that if you're still enough, really still, you might feel her too. In the silence that followed, no one clapped. They just sat with it, letting it ripple. Somewhere in another city at the edge of a quiet street, a woman placed a folded paper on a park bench. She wore a soft beige coat, curls tucked under a red scarf, her eyes scanning the clouds above like they were telling secrets. A boy sat down moments later, crying silently into his hoodie. He noticed the paper, opened it with trembling fingers. This isn't the end. You're just early. He didn't understand it, but he stopped crying. A few feet away, Nora watched from behind a tree, her breath visible in the winter air. She placed her hand over her chest and closed her eyes, feeling the shift. She wasn't famous. She wasn't remembered, but her ripples reached farther than she'd ever see. She whispered, "One more moment." Then the next. And as she turned to leave, a butterfly landed on her shoulder, even though it was snowing. Back in the town she left behind, the mural had grown. New butterflies were painted weekly, all in different styles from different hands. Above them, someone had painted bold letters in gold. They called her crazy, but she changed everything. The community center reopened as a shelter for at-risk youth. The school started a new elective, micro actions and big change. Kaio still carried her marble in his coat, and sometimes, when he hesitated, he'd take it out and listen, not with his ears, but with memory. No one saw Nora again, but her presence was in every second chance, every softened heart, every small decision made with thought. She had once said, "The butterfly never meets the storm it creates, but maybe, just maybe, the storm remembers the butterfly." And in that way, she was never gone. She had simply become the wind. If this story moved you in any way, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Honestly, every like, every subscription is what keeps this channel breathing. Without your support, it's nearly impossible to keep going. So if you can help, know that this only exists because of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next story.